This is Get UNSTUCK Radio episode 28. Be a better human at work and at home with William Sampson. Welcome to Get UNSTUCK Radio, the place to brainstorm with you on business and life strategy. To get unstuck with system, automation, and delegation. And also to get clarity for sustainable business and lifestyle. I'm your host, Mutita Panmook. Let's get unstuck. Hi everyone, so today I have a special guest, William Sampson, who is an amazing leadership coach speaker. He mentioned in his bio that in the corporate space, William works with entrepreneurs and executives to build themselves and their team members' leadership skill from the bench of boardroom. And right now, he also helping building better humans, and he also having the project with the leaders at home so that they can change from the family stress to family best. Please welcome William Sampson with me here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Mutita. Enjoying this.
This is such a good opportunity for me to ask about leadership. I'm excited.
Good. I'm excited about this too. Give me a stump and a story in an audience to somebody that'll listen to me, and I can talk all day. So you tell me when I need to slow down.
My pleasure. So tell me a little bit why you start into the leadership training industry then.
Yeah, it's, my story goes back to a conversation that my dad and I had when I was in high school. My parents divorced when I was about 11 years of age. And so my dad, every year, my brother and my dad and I would do some sort of trip together. And this would have been probably my senior in high school, 16, 17 years of age. We're coming back from New Mexico in the middle of the night, and we're having a conversation. And he shared with me that his relationship that he and my granddad had was never a good one. It was very, very difficult. And he said by the time he had developed enough self-awareness and emotional intelligence to understand that he was a large part of the problem, my grandfather had passed away, and he was never able to heal that relationship with his dad. So he said he had done a lot of work himself to try to develop that self-awareness and emotional intelligence so that he was able to be a better version of himself, so that the relationship that he had with my brother and I was vastly different than the one that he'd had with his father. So kind of think about breaking the cycle of dysfunction within a family. And one of my statements, and I'll get to the book story in a minute. One of my statements is that emotional intelligence, self-awareness and emotional intelligence is the cornerstone of every relationship that you'll ever have, both personally and professionally. Until we can be the best version of ourselves and understand who we are, we're never going to be the best version of ourselves that those people around us that count on us need us to be, whether it's our family,
like when we are not yet fulfilled within, right? We still lacking something. We have to improve within ourselves. Yeah, I have been there. I'm still working on myself every single day.
We at some level we all are. And it's, one of the leaders that I listened to early on in my career was a guy named Earl Nightingale. And Earl Nightingale's philosophy was, if you'll devote, 10,000 hours, or if you'll work 5 years, so an average work year is 2,000 hours times 5 years is 10,000 hours. If you'll do that, then you can be an expert at anything you set your mind to. At some point, we during that process, we stopped the thought of how long is this going to take, and we switched to the mindset of how far can I go. You bring that same thought process forward, and you look at Patrick Lencioni's work, and he looks at leaders in different industries across the world. Guys like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Charles Schwab, and it was about that 10,000 hours, which equates. Nightingale did his work back 70 or 100 years ago. Lencioni did his work in the last 20 years. It comes out to the same piece. Once we get to about 10,000 hours of working on something, then we become that true expert in it. So as we're shooting for that goal, if you will, how long is it going to take to get there? At some point, the mind switches off to, well, okay, I can go so much further than that by just continuing on. Thinking about goals is not necessarily an endpoint, but a stepping stone.
Wow. This is the thing that involves every perspective in life, right? And you mentioned that we cannot influence anyone if we cannot connect with them. or we cannot understand them.
Right. When I'm starting my presentations or conversations, a lot of times I'm a person of faith. So I talk about God, and I want people to understand right away that I'm just because I have a mindset of who my God is, that doesn't mean that that it diminishes yours whatsoever. So it's kind of like the conversation we had before we got started about perspective. If we look at this as a topic or an issue, what we need in this world is for people to be able to look at this and to see things from the other side of the coin, or if we can't see it, to understand that the person that can see it, their opinion is just as valid as mine as to what they're looking at. One's not right or wrong, one's not good or bad, they're just different. And when we can understand that and have an honest conversation about what we see, feel, and believe, and understand and receive that from the person that we're working with, then there's not a problem in this world that we can't solve. So because we're dealing with people, it doesn't matter if we're dealing with our kids around the breakfast table or if we're dealing with a CEO of an international corporation. We still, we still pull our skirts on or our pants on one leg at a time. There are some of y'all out there that are limber enough they can jump up and do it at once. I'm not that way, even when I was an athlete. But the fact of the matter is, at the root, we're all still people. And when we can kind of cut through all the rhetoric and the noise and everything that we hear in the world, and just say, this is a beautiful example. You're in Northern Ireland. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. You're a Filipino descent. I'm a Caucasian guy that grew up in North America. But we can have a great open conversation because we respect each other's opinions and understand that you're valuable and beautiful and intelligent, and you bring as much or more to the conversation than I do. We talk about, you hear it frequently. Look, we got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. We need to use them in proportion. Some people get the math wrong on that. They think it's 1 of 3. Well, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. There's 5. So you need to listen 80% of the time and speak 20% of the time. And if you'll do that, you'll listen more, you'll hear things. And another issue that I run across all the time is that we tend to listen to respond, not to understand. And what I try to help teach people to do is to slow down long enough to hear what the other person's saying. And that's one of the beauties of this type of technology. You and I can sit here and have a conversation, and I can see your facial features. If I say something that you don't like, that smile's going to go down on the sides.
Yeah, that's right.
but it all dials back to me understanding my opinion is valuable and just like anybody else's. But it doesn't mean that I have to try to make my opinion that of somebody else's. We'll always do better if we can learn rather than respond.
Yeah, I always notice that, like, for example, my previous boyfriend, let's say, they only hear what I say, but they not listen.
Right.
You laugh. Yeah, that's a big problem somehow because they're not interested in that topic.
It was, and I've heard this many times before, but I heard it again this morning, and I think it's relevant. Helen Keller. Somebody asked Helen Keller, about how bad was it that she couldn't see, and she said, well, it's not near as bad as those that can see that have sight. I guess the question was, what is it like to be without sight? And she said it's not near as bad as those that have sight that have no vision. So. It's kind of all about dissecting things and backing up. But I think the other story you were asking me about with my dad was about the book that he gave me.
Yeah.
My dad was an engineer, very, very tightly wound, very reserved, very task oriented. I'm diametrically opposed on the personality spectrum. So he really never understood the idea that I didn't want to be an engineer and I didn't want to do all those kind of things. And was in sales. And like I said, give me a stump and a story and somebody to listen to it, and I'm in my element. But he gave me a book on sales when I was 19 years old, and I actually it's on the shelf back there.
Oh, you still keep it? Wow, it's so lovely.
Yeah, in fact, I used to take it with me to presentations and have it sitting up on the lectern or on the table, but it's the binding's coming apart and everything. It's because it's quite old, actually.
No one knows, William. No one knows. No one knows.
So, but yeah, it's a lifelong learning process. And so, yes, I started with that book on sales, and the guy that wrote the book was a guy named Joe Girardi, and evidently, still to this day, he holds sales records within General Motors, haven't even been close to being touched. But it was all about being very high touch with people. And it's interesting, the more high tech we get in the world, the more things that I'm seeing where going back and doing things, what we would call old school, is having a greater and greater impact on people and being able to stay connected.
I was just thinking when you mentioned that, because I feel like right now on this online world, people who are thought leaders, let's say, they go back to the classic period, like in your time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean about it's long time, but like those books that is like original of the personal development, which is more like, let's say, it's the original one that is the core value of these years that what we are learning. So I think this is like to hear from the people from the different perspective, and especially those who already have experienced longer time, that's totally powerful and different because it's deeper, you know.
Well, times change, but people don't. So, we're dealing with different things now. One of the things that, and I think we talked about this on the beginning, was that I work with John Maxwell's organization. So a lot of the information that I get comes through John, and I use his material on a day-to-day basis. That plus, I'll be honest, 40 years of experience in the field doing sales and leadership and training and development. So, but when we first shut all this down, the Maxwell organization, we were supposed to be in Orlando, Florida. 3,500 of us from every corner of the planet. We get together twice a year for our annual convention, and we were supposed to be in Orlando in March. And just as this was breaking, they made the decision to cancel that. So we ended up doing that. We ended up doing it virtually. I mean, you talk about a major pivot when you literally have people from, and I say every corner of the planet. I've got friends literally in every country, just about every country in the world that I can think of. And, they all had travel plans, and some of it's days to get from Zimbabwe or from South Africa or Myanmar or New Zealand or Thailand or China or Japan to get to Orlando, Florida. And it's all on our own expenses. The company, Maxwell, doesn't pay for this. This is us coming back twice a year. To talk with my girlfriend, I said, there's probably not anywhere on the planet that we can't go that I can't connect with somebody from Maxwell that I know.
Yeah, that's really like long term.
Yep. Well, and the group that where you and I met with Sean and Nadia, I've invited two of my friends that are in Luxembourg. In fact, Monica's birthday's today, and I just sent her a message, wishing her happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday then.
So Monica, if you're watching, hey, happy birthday.
Hey. Yeah. Wow, amazing. Let's touch a little bit about what you do. So I want to talk about the behavior analysis of people who stay together, work together, in general, how we connect better based on that.
Yes. Well, one of our tenets is that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And you can't influence somebody unless you can connect with them. And in fact, I do a training on that I call communication gets the word out, but connection gets the job done. And it's all about it's five ideas and five processes and five procedures on 5 principles and 5 procedures on how to learn to connect better with other people. But about being able to connect with people, and we go back to understanding. So I work with the DISC method of behavioral analysis. It was developed by a guy named Dr. William Marston back in the 20s as his doctoral thesis at Harvard University. Interestingly enough, when we look at the history of human behavior going back 2,500 years, they've just called it different things. The early philosophers thought, well, it was the elements of the world that influenced our behaviors. The sun, wind, earth, fire, and then Hippocrates, the founder of medicine, the Hippocratic Oath, he said, well, it's the internal fluids. It's where sanguine or choleric or melancholy or phlegmatic. And then you fast forward to the 20th century, and then you had Dr. Carl Jung came up with the Myers-Briggs. Same thing. You have 4 personality styles that work within each other, and then Dr. Marston came up with DISC. So the really interesting part, at least from my standpoint, is take 2,500 years of thought on human behavior, and they still only come up with 4 styles. And within DISC, I like it because it's very simple to explain and help people understand. And there's basically 2 delineating questions. So the first one is, and understand that we all have bits and pieces of all 4 styles in us. So they just manifest themselves differently as, primary, secondary, tertiary styles. So the first one is you feel like you're more outgoing or more reserved. So when I'm doing presentations on this, I have, so I have pictures up on the screen. I said, well, so if you're getting on an elevator, do you hope that there's somebody on that side or in the car, or do you hope that the car is clear?
Clear. Okay.
So you would be probably more reserved. See,
yeah.
I'm on the other side. I want to see who's in there. Do I know them? Can I make a new friend? Is there a dog in there? I love dogs. Is there going to be an opportunity for me to make a connection with somebody in there? Because you never know. What's the game shows? What's behind door number 2? So that's the first question. Do you feel like you're more outgoing or more reserved? Then the second question is, do you feel like you're more task-oriented or more relational? So in the question, the way I go with that is, okay, if you're going on vacation, are you the person that's got the checklist on 60 days, 30 days, 2 weeks, 1 week? You know who's taking care of the mail, the dog, the plants, you've got all the details worked out. Or are you thinking about who am I going with? What am I going to do? What am I going to see? What am I going to eat? What experiences am I going to have?
I do both.
Okay, well, understand. And it could be 51-49%, but whichever is, and I tell people, whatever the first one that comes into your mind is, that's probably the one that is the more prominent of the 2. And again, it could be really close, 51-49, but there's going to be one that's going to be slightly more, resonate with you slightly more than the other one. Okay. So when we break that down into a grid, those that are, and this will be backwards because of the cameras and everything, but if we look at if we draw a grid in the upper left-hand corner, the people on the left side of the vertical line are task-oriented. The ones on the right-hand side are more relational. If we look at the horizontal midline, the ones above the midline are going to be outgoing. The ones below the midline are going to be reserved. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have the outgoing, task-oriented. That's what we call the Ds, or the dominants, or the drivers. They're the ones that want to be in charge. They want to run things. They're the ones that they're the visionaries. They've got the ideas. Now, they don't know how to make it happen, or they don't know. They're not going to be the ones that make it happen, but they have the ideas. They make up about 3% of the population, which is good, because if the whole world were wired that way, the rest of us we'd be pulling our hair out, because everybody want to be in charge. So, like what we're doing right now with the family stress to family best is, if you got a child that's oriented that way, give them tasks, things to do that they can be in charge of, that they can take ownership of, because that's going to make them feel good. That's going to make them feel fulfilled. Same thing as we get into the workplace. They're going to be the ones that are typically going to be your executives, the drivers, the salespeople, those kind of folks. When we get to the other side, still on the outgoing, but we get to the people that are outgoing but relational, and that's me. That's my style. We make up about 11% of the population. So when you look at that, the interesting thing is that only about 14% of the overall population is outgoing. So
So this one is influence, right?
Influence, yep. Influence, wow. Inspiring. We're the ones that we want to get the job done, but we want to make sure we have fun doing it. We are the ones that, now let me go back to the Ds. The greatest fear of a D is losing control.
Mm-hmm.
So when they feel like their power is being usurped, or they feel like, and it could be a relational thing. It could be they feel like their relationship has been taken advantage of. Natural reaction is going to be to jump into it harder, become more dominant, be more overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when we get under stress, that personality type has got to find the ability to have a release for their energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't find a good release for their energy, it can manifest itself in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
Now go back to the I types. Our biggest fear is people not paying attention to us. So when we feel like we're not in the spotlight, or we're not being listened to, we become louder, more verbose. We talk more.
So this is attention seekers.
Yes, it's not necessarily that they have to have it, but they're very comfortable with it. But if they feel like it's being removed from them, they will seek it. And then staying on the relational side, but being more introverted.
Me.
That's what we call the S's, or the steadies.
Wait, this is the task one with the reserve, right?
No, this is reserved and relational.
Okay, so reservation. Okay,
that's almost 70% of the population. About 69% of the overall population is that steady style. They are the ones that will get the job done. If you give them a task and ask them to help you, they will charge hell with a squirt gun for you.
Mm-hmm.
Their biggest fear is loss of security or a changing environment. So if you've got a group, and understand that's almost 70% of the population. So think about, with what's going on in their world right now, if they're used to being in school or at work, or, out of the house, and they're cooped up, that change of situation is causing them stress. Now, the fact that they're very more reserved, they're less worried about being at home, because that's really comfortable to them, then they're the ones that are going to be fearful of having to go into the grocery stores and whatnot now, because of the potential for getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got friends that are that personality style, they're the ones you need to reach out to. They're the ones you need to really stay in touch with.
Mm-hmm. These are the people who go deep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
The last, and like I said, that's 69% of the overall population. So the vast majority of the people are in that category.
Oh,
so
not this one. I'm the last one. Okay.
You're the last one. The C's are what we call the compliance. They're the ones that are reserved and task oriented. That was my dad. My dad he flew he flew for the Navy, and he was an engineer for IBM for 30 years. That was his world. You put him inside those 9 dots, and he's very competent. Get him, and that's one of the things that he understood about himself, was that he had to come out of that to be the better version of himself, to be the father that my brother and I needed him to be. And he worked on that his entire life. And they're about 17% of the population. So when you break it down, you look at the task-oriented side, they're about 20%. The relational is about 80%. So when we're trying to connect with somebody, I use the term live life right to left.
What is that? Can you repeat that again?
Live life right to left.
Live
So
life.
if you look at the grid, the relational is on the right side, the task is on the left side.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that if you start off being relational with somebody who's task oriented, they're a little stronger personalities, so they'll deal with it. You may get them looking at, come on, let's speed this up. And if if you start talking about your friends and family and the weather and what's going on, current events, with somebody who's task oriented, they'll do it, but they'll start. You'll see the answers getting shorter and shorter, because they want to get to the point. But if you start straight away task with somebody who's highly relational, they're going to shut down, because they don't feel like you're valuing them. They're just like, well, they just want to get in here, get the job done, and get out of here. They want to hit and run.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start off with somebody that you don't know, now once you know somebody, if you know that they're task oriented, you're task oriented, you go in there, you say, here's what I need, here's what I've got, here's what I've done, here's what I need, when can you have it, and get consensus and go, and they're going to be fine with that. But if you do that with somebody who's highly relational, they're going to shut down, and it's going to take you longer to get back to ground zero and then to work on what you need them to do than if you just go in there and started off with them, being more relational.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a little softer personality. They tend to take things more personally.
But when this is just my question, when I try to use the emotion part more to connect with them, doesn't seem it resonates so far. Is that a normal question? So when I try to connect with them in terms of the relational people, I find it's not me that is one, but I try to get out of my comfort zone, of course, but I feel it's not on the same page, even though I try, or I haven't tried that hard enough.
It's practice. It just takes practice. I tell the task-oriented people, make being relational a task. Make being relational a task.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that you're dealing with somebody who's relational, like when we first got on the phone, we were chatty and went back and forth, and you being you kept going back to, here's what I put together as the intro. It's, how does that look, or what do we need? But you did a good job, of having conversation and just, getting to know me a little bit more and understanding, listening to my stories. But then you came right back in line with, so I would say that you do that well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you. I mean, I'm trying because I have to learn though. It's it's very important. My mom's always say this is also another thing. I have to try the way of my tonality as well. When I was younger, when I speak, the ending of my voice is always short. And she said it's always gave the bad impression to the opposite party all the time. And
Okay.
But I didn't think about that because I thought that I have done my job already and I just move on, I just do it fast. And especially I was a faster speaker. I spoke so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I have made a lot of bad first impression to many people already, I know.
But it all revolves around self-awareness. Developing self-awareness and emotional intelligence and understanding, who you are. And as you understand because you can't be aware of something until you're aware of it. So once you're aware of something that you do inhibits your ability to connect with somebody, and then you're aware of it, it's not gonna happen every time, but it'll happen more times. And the more times you do it, the more times you practice. It's at 10,000 hours again. Not that you're going to spend 10,000 hours working on being more relational, but over time, over your lifetime, just knowing. I've got one of my coaching clients, and one of the things that we're trying to work on is, he said, I just don't have any empathy. If they don't get it, well, then the hell with them. That's the way it is. Just go on. I give him. He's a sports fan, so I give him a sports analogy. I said, when something like that's, you've got a thought that's coming into your head, and I'm using this for a specific situation, but it can be applied to virtually anything. Negative thinking or negative self-talk or anything like that. When you've got a thought coming into your head that is not serving you best, it's like you're sitting at a baseball game down the first baseline and they hit a line drive foul ball that's coming right at your head.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your ability to get your glove up and capture that thought in the glove and then turn it over and look at it, say, isn't that interesting? So to be able to take that thought and dissect it, and there's a book called Fierce Conversations, and the term she uses in there is called interrogate reality. So you take that thought and you look at it, with my clients, we're using the analogy of looking at it like it's a baseball, and we're going to look at it and we're going to interrogate that. So we're going to go through the thought process of, does this thought serve me, and does it serve me well? And if it does, well, then you keep it. You allow it to come on through. If it doesn't, you take it and you throw it back to the first baseman, and they keep playing the game. But what you've been able to do is you've been able to stop something that potentially doesn't serve you well, interrogate it, and you make the decision whether you keep it or not.
I'm a strong believer that everyone's always have options. It depends on you. And the belief actually changed by time. Like I'm thinking back when I was younger, I didn't be myself right now. I mean, I growing up by people who I surrounded with, who I connected with, what kind of job or like school life and so on. I have changed a lot by time. Like for real, it seems like I have too many personality right now. That somehow scare me sometimes. I know, but it's the fact. But it's because I choose to be who I am today.
Mhm.
And that is the choice that I made. And I totally understand what you mean. It's like when I evaluate myself when I'm about to have anxiety attack or something. Is this thought deserve me or not? Or like just take it off, take it off.
That's a great time, especially if you suffer from anxiety. When you get a thought or something that makes you anxious, when you capture that thought, you turn it over and look at it and interrogate it. Is this true? Well, no, it's probably not true. Okay, well then you take and you throw it away. And it's easy. I understand it's easier said than done because I struggle with a lot of those things myself, and we always do. But to be able to capture that and to be aware that you're having that thought and that it doesn't serve you well, you have the option now of determining what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the time, people it's like Groundhog Day. They just keep living the same day over and over and over and over again. One of my favorite quotes is from a book by a guy named James Allen that was written 100 years ago. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And the quote is, most people want to change their situation, but are unwilling to change themselves.
Ooh.
They therefore remain bound.
Yeah, that's the fact. I know.
Really simple, really powerful, but really deep. It's available in the public record. It's available. You can pull it off the internet as a PDF document, free of charge. The whole book's about 7,000 words. When I first read it, going to sleep one night. I mean, it was on a list of books that somebody had said, the 10 books that'll change your life, and that was one of them. And it was like, okay, it was one of those things that was like check the box. Well, then faculty from John Maxwell we did a book study on it. We were a little over an hour a day for 12 days in a row going through that book. We spent the whole first hour just going over the foreword, which is 125 words or something like that. There's a lot of power in that book and I can get copies of it, $2, something like that. And I keep copies of them around and I give them to people. I've had people challenge me on it. And I've got a really nice friend of mine here in town that just refuses to get out of her own way, to understand that she's the problem. And until she can identify that, she's not going to do anything to change it. She's perfectly content at this point to just go through life saying, these are circumstances beyond my control. And that's not true. And it's so sad because if you change your mind, and I tell people all the time, change your mind, change your life. It's a simple thing to say, but it's a difficult thing to live out. Because again, you go back to once you're aware of something, you know what to beware of. And once you beware of those things that are not self-serve, that don't serve you well, then you now have the obligation to do something different. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, because you have to live with it.
Right. And that's part of what I help people do through the coaching aspect of it, is to identify those things that don't serve them well, and then to get them to think at a different level into why they've allowed them to stay in their life as long as they have, and how to be able to get rid of those things and to replace them with more productive thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, that's very important. And it's very hard to discover this thing by yourself. I mean, it would take time. I believe that people who I know currently, they wouldn't realize the problem until they are like at the bottom already. And it's always hard to like evaluate all the situation and get back on your feet because you're already the deepest part of your life.
A lot of times people don't know where to look for the problem. And that's one of the things that the report that we generate, and I'll just use Maxwell for example, the DISC assessment, we call it the Maxwell DISC Personality Indicator Report. This is 30 pages.
30 pages to know which personality you are?
Well, it starts off with, what the different styles are, what they mean. It goes through and it gives me graphs on what my style is. It describes my style. My style is called the advisor. Talks about different communication techniques. If communicating with somebody like me, here's the things to do. What the greatest fear of that. Greatest fear is loss of social acceptance and change, especially in relationships. So I was in a domestic violence situation with my last marriage. My ex-wife couldn't keep her hands or things to herself, and would throw things and hit and that kind of stuff. And I didn't start doing, learning doing the deep analysis of personality until about 7 years after we had divorced. And then that one piece was one of the keys to help me unlock and understand why I'd stayed in that relationship for so long when I knew it was toxic.
Oh.
Because it was easier to, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. So in my particular personality, my particular personality style is you just try to be better. You try to be better. You try to be better. Well, if you're with somebody who's a narcissist and there's nothing you'll ever do that's going to be good enough, because it can't be, because we've heard the term many times, hurting people hurt people. So until she was willing and able to work on herself and understand that what she was doing to me, we could never get better. So when I finally had the last meeting with our psychiatrist and said, look, here's what's going on. And he came back to me and said, it takes two, and I see what she's doing, and she's unwilling to change. She therefore remains bound. She wants her circumstances to change, but doesn't understand that she's the part of the problem and willing to change to affect that change. Then it was getting to the point that it was going to be, it was physically a problem for me, where she was hitting and throwing, and I had broken wine glasses across my head and stuff like that. So I left, but it wasn't until it was because I had that validation from somebody out on the exterior that said, you've done everything you can. She's unwilling to meet you halfway, that it now became unsustainable. So that's when I left. We really haven't talked much about this, but in the Family Stress to Family Best, this is one of those situations where, unfortunately, the domestic violence and child abuse and all those kind of things are increasing dramatically because we're all together, and because people don't have the skills to understand how to express themselves verbally, so they have to do it physically, because that's kind of that primal instinct. That's what they know, and that's an unfortunate thing. But it's our reality. So for us to be able to take this knowledge to the family marketplace right now and help people understand the beautiful part of this, as we start going back to work and they see what difference it made in their home life with those people that mean the most to them, that really mean something to them, then they can take this back to their businesses, their companies, and their teams. And I'm excited to see what's on the other side, because part of this is the way I deal with the crisis right now is this is just valley of the shadow that I'm going through. This is not the new reality. This is not where it ends. This is a crisis that we're going through. When we can have that thought process that this is just another challenge we're going through, and not get stuck here. There's a country and western song here in the United States. It's like, it says something about if you're going through hell, keep on going. You might get out before the devil even knows you're there. So, but one of the problems is that if we don't get into our mind and we don't learn who we are, it's easy to get mired down in that this is the situation and I'm stuck here. you're never stuck. There's always something, you're always just going through something. Working with young kids and helping them understand. One of the programs that unfortunately I was supposed to do in March and April that got removed because of the social distancing was for a community center working with fifth graders that are getting ready to leave elementary school, going into middle school, helping them understand, because it's a very depressed area of town.
Very critical period of life.
Perfect timing, but helping them understand that your situation does not define you. And a quote that a friend of mine and I came up with over dinner one night is, your situation is no more responsible for your actions and results than the mirror is for your appearance. So just because you're in a situation that you don't like and you wouldn't have chosen for yourself, that does not give you any license to have that affect making better choices and decisions, because making better choices and decisions is what will affect your circumstances going forward.
Yeah, that's very important. It totally will change your future, but I get that, long place at the wrong time. But yeah, it's hard though to get out of those places.
And that's why you need somebody like me that helps with the coaching, to help you think into it and to hold you accountable for your results. So when I sell a coaching package, it's a lump sum paid all at once, and it's for 10 sessions. And I do it that way because if we can get through 10 sessions, there will be breakthroughs and changes in there. If they're paying me month to month and they get into the third or fourth month and they're still doing the work, but they're not getting the breakthroughs yet, the tendency to want to quit is really high. But if they're financially committed to the block of time and they're going to go through it, by the time we get through 10 sessions, they will see results.
Yeah, like when go to see consulting, they always strict to the numbers. I mean, I got asked my university support those consulting, so I have money to pay. It's included.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. I think I have to rewatch this interview again. There are many things that I would like to recap with myself. I learned a lot from you today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you so much that come join me today and teach me and also educate my audience and anyone who listen to this or watch this from YouTube about how important to know the behavior or like the personality of person who you are dealing with right now and connect with them, understand them better to live better together. And that's how you build better humans, right?
That's how I build better humans. Yep.
So in case anyone want to work with you, William, how can they reach out to you then?
Well, my email address is william@wkspeaker.com. It's just my initials, WKS, and then word speaker on that. My website is wkspeaker.com. That's in the process of being reworked right now, but it is up and running. If they're here in the United States, my cell phone is 972 area code 849-9557. Would love to have a conversation with anybody who kind of feels like they're stuck or knows that there's more and just isn't sure how to get there. Like I said, all of my consultation begins with a DISC assessment and a debrief where we get the client's specific report, and then we go through that and use that as the basis of understanding to begin to unlock things. I work, with individuals, I work with groups, I work with corporations. The Family Stress to Family Best is something that I'm doing for schools, churches, nonprofits right now for their constituents. That's a free presentation. The only upsell on that is at the end, if they want to do a deeper dive with their family, with their kids, then they buy the assessments and the coaching and debriefing from me. With companies and organizations, great for boards of directors. We talk about building better humans. We also talk about building leaders from the bench to the boardroom. And one of the quotes that I use is from the former UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden, who said, "When opportunity arises, it's a terrible time to prepare. So essentially, it's too late to prepare. That's talking about with companies building up your team of what they call bench players, guys that are not ready to go to the front lines just yet, but that are getting those junior executives or people ready to step into roles of increasing responsibility when the opportunity arises. So that's building the bench. And then at the board level, just working with them to help them understand the personalities, strengths, weaknesses, fears, blind spots of each person at the table, so that when we have something like this that we need to digest or to a problem to solve, that we can each understand that we're looking at the same thing from a different perspective. And again, back to the idea that one is not right or wrong or good or bad, they're just different. And when we can understand and have that respect for one another, there's not an issue in this world that we can't solve. And I fully believe that. So
Thank you so much, William.
Mutita, it's absolutely my pleasure. Love to have a conversation with you. We'll do this again if we get a good response to it, and you want to do a deeper dive into any one of the areas. So
Sure. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Get UNSTUCK Radio. If you enjoy the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get new show every week. I would love to if you left us the review. If you want to get unstuck, check my 5-step entrepreneur freedom formula for scaling your business without sacrificing your lifestyle at worldwideweb.extraordinarylybymutita.com/freedom. Speak then.